Today I'm going to be talking about how I've adapted my teaching to better suit the needs of SEND students I've been teaching during my placement year. I'll be looking at different strategies to ensure that SEND students are supported, and specifically how to support autistic students by creating a positive working environment and breaking down information. This presentation relates to Standard 5 of the Department of Education Teacher Standards, which is to adapt teaching to respond to the strengths and needs of all pupils. When it comes to government policy on SEN inclusion, I looked at two important policies, the 1996 Education Act and the Children and Families Act in 2014. The 1996 Education Act was important for special educational needs in the UK because it provided a clear legal framework for how children with special educational needs should be identified, supported and included in the education system. It gave children with special needs legal protection, required local authorities to act, and strengthened the rights of families. It marked a shift towards greater accountability and inclusion in the education system. The Children and Families Act 2014 significantly reformed the education system when it came to SEND education and built upon earlier laws such as the 1996 Education Act. It modernised, expanded and strengthened many of its principles. On this slide you can see some policies the Children and Families Act of 2014 introduced. And here you can see the legal framework the Act provided for schools. Of the SEND needs, I'll be focusing on autism. The National Autistic Society in the UK estimates that autistic spectrum disorder is estimated to touch the lives of over 500 families throughout the UK. Autism is defined as a lifelong developmental disability that affects the way a person communicates and relates to people around them. The term autism spectrum disorder is a medical diagnosis. In order to be diagnosed, there needs to be evidence of differences in certain core areas of development compared with that of a typical child or young person for a diagnosis of autism to be given. This evidence should show that everyday life is affected by these differences in an ongoing manner. When diagnosing autism, specialists are aiming to look out for the core areas shown on the slide here. Like with most SEND diagnoses, autistic learners vary in their profile of strengths and needs, life experience and the presence of other conditions. No two individuals on the autism spectrum are the same. Autistic learners need to be understood as individuals first and foremost. I believe that one of the most impactful approaches for supporting SEND students is through high quality inclusive teaching. This means adaptive teaching, removing barriers to learning and getting to know and understand individual learners. A proactive approach that encompasses quality-first teaching, reasonable adjustment and tailored interventions will support most autistic learners in a mainstream environment. Provision plans are an important tool to ensure consistency of provision, which will encourage progress towards agreed measurable outcomes. For quality-first teaching to be realised, Autism Education Trust have identified 4 principles. Number 1, understanding the individual with autism. Number 2, building positive relationships. Number 3, through learning and development. And number 4, for enabling environments. From my review of the literature, I've identified these strategies as some of the key strategies for supporting students with autism. Effective adaptive teaching for both SEND learners and all learners will use these strategies, but the two I will focus on are creating a positive classroom environment and information breakdown. To effectively deliver information to autistic learners, it's crucial to break down complex topics into manageable chunks, to use visual aids, and to ensure clear and concise communication. This includes providing instructions in a structured format, like lists, and allowing ample processing time. Also, it's important to consider the learner's strengths and preferences, such as their potential for visual or auditory learning, and their focus on details. As a trainee art teacher, I have learned about the benefits of demonstrating technical skills to students, and so my practical lessons often include a demonstration where the students come to the front and watch me go through an artistic process from beginning to end. Whilst this is enough for most students to understand the task and then go back to their desk and execute what I showed them, some students really struggle with the sensory overload of trying to concentrate with the whole class stood around a small table, and also struggle to retain all the verbal steps given in the demonstration. My first case study, which I'll call Student A, fell under this category of struggling with the demonstrations. Before I knew that this student was autistic, I thought that they were just showing negative classroom behaviour. After I realised that the demonstrations done like this were not suited to their needs. Whilst the demonstrations were helpful for most of the classroom, I felt that they were not helping the student, as it was not breaking down the information in a way that supports autistic learners. Whilst demonstrations were using clear and concise language as well as chunking and listing information, they were not using visual supports. They were overstimulating, they had lots of steps to follow, and they were not individualized. To accommodate the student to be able to access the learning, I decided that firstly, they didn't have to watch the demonstrations, as I knew that they found the stimulation of being around all the students in a more uncontrolled environment too distracting and overwhelming. Instead, I had a printout of the instructions for the student, and I would go to them after the demonstration and do a one-to-one demonstration in smaller chunks. I would tell them to ignore the original demonstrations, as that had many steps, and just focus on the small chunked instructions I had given them. After which I would demonstrate the next chunk, building on their new knowledge. This meant that they would get to the same outcome as the rest of the class. They just needed the information in smaller sections, as all the information at once was an information overload for them. This became a repeated routine with the student, so they felt comfortable and understood how the demonstration aspect of the lesson would go. It worked well in terms of information breakdown, but also meant that my relationship with the student was a lot stronger through the care of one-to-one support. It also only worked due to the positive learning environment in which the rest of the class would work effectively after the demonstrations so that I could give student A my full attention. I've worked openly with the class to create a judgment-free classroom. This student is very open about their autism, and so giving them a bit of extra support is not something that is highlighted in a negative way by the rest of the class. As mentioned with case study A, creating a positive learning environment gives me, the teacher, the opportunity to find out more about the learner, to find out about the difficulty he or she experiences and reflect on what will best address the learning barriers. As the literature in ASD clearly states, no two autistic students are the same. It's a spectrum with varying needs, so you need to adapt your strategies to each student. Looking at the Autism Speaks websites, the two main strategies for creating a positive learning environment I've focused on are promoting a welcoming environment and teaching and understanding acceptance. Art as a subject lends itself to classroom discussion and conversation. We can touch on many topics, including SEND and education. Creating a safe environment where learners can voice their opinions and feel heard by others is essential to having positive art lessons. To promote a positive classroom environment where students feel safe to create, explore and share, it is important to have clear rules and principles. It is also important that these are clear and simple. I start each of my schemes of work with my 5 classroom rules, which I repeat and clarify throughout the year. This is especially helpful for ASD students who benefit from clear and concise instructions, as well as a stable and consistent work environment. Classroom routines and consistent pedagogical practice are integral to creating the optimum conditions and environments for learning. Keeping the routine as predictable as possible is fundamental for many autistic learners. When teaching, I like to ensure that there are no surprises in this classroom, so students are told what they are going to learn, what it will involve, and how long they'll be doing it for. Like with the first case study, the second with student B involves both strategies of creating a positive classroom environment as well as information breakdown. The challenge with student B was getting them to think flexibly to form creative concepts. This was a challenge with all Year 8 students, but particularly with autistic students. As the SEN handbook states, thinking flexibly is a challenge for most autistic learners. The project we were working on was issue-based art, and I was asking students to come up with their own issues or ideas to then create a protest banner. It was originally very difficult to get student B to come up with an idea and be able to understand why I was asking this. They struggled with the open-ended manner of this request and being able to imagine where this will go. To make this more accessible for student B, I broke the request down into questions which didn't have endless possible answers, but instead more straightforward answers that, when put together, gave the student their concept. We wrote these down so the student had these answers to come back to, as they often strayed outside of the scaffolded concept. These adapted sheets allowed the learner to break down complicated tasks into more manageable chunks. As a project on issue-based art, this student chose to speak about their autism and the lack of support in mainstream schools for autistic children. They bravely stood up and presented their project to the whole class, giving the student an opportunity to talk about their autism, gave them a sense of belonging and being heard in the class, and it taught understanding and acceptance to the rest of the class. This was only made possible due to the positive understanding and open-minded classroom environment. Students are taught to listen, respect, and not judge. They are also taught to voice that is important to them, to voice what is important to them, and be able to embrace that they are unique individuals. So my concluding points for this presentation are firstly that art lessons allow space for acceptance and individuality. If done in a safe space, this can be very healthy for autistic learners to learn to have a voice in the classroom and feel a sense of belonging. Secondly, that high quality teaching will benefit all learners, and a big part of high quality teaching is adaptive teaching, where each student is catered to and treated as an individual. It's important to get to know each individual SEND student to understand their specific needs, as no two learners are the same. All students will benefit from a positive learning environment and information breakdown. In this presentation, I've shown how I have individualized these two strategies to adapt to two individual autistic learners. And this image is the final product of the year 8 of student B, who wanted to speak about how everyone tells her how amazing autism is, but no one talks about how difficult it can be. I thought it was a really nice take on autism, and it was really lovely to see her share that with the class. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.